You can put the most powerful weapons you want on your mobile suit, but if you don't have the energy to power them, they're useless. Just ask anyone who's ever played any Armored Core game. So today we're having a look at the most powerful power supplies in all of Gundam, brought to you by the most powerful VPN around, NordVPN. Whether you need to dodge some pesky region locks or you just want some more security online, Nord is there to supercharge your internet experience. I couldn't live without it anymore, and if you too want to join the Nord side by using the link down below or the code kkrt, you'll not just get a sweet discount, but you'll also be supporting the channel. And we're starting with what I think is the least overpowered of these overpowered engines, the Hyper-Deuterion engine from Gundam Seed Destiny. Generally speaking, mobile suit engines in the Cosmic era were rather wimpy compared to some of the other universes. Instead of full-on reactors, they simply ran on rechargeable batteries, meaning that for heavy firepower, they also needed some heavy trade-offs. Either more batteries had to be installed, limiting mobility, or their operating time would be drastically cut. So Zaft would come up with two main ways to circumvent these limitations. First, they would invent a gizmo that would allow a nuclear reactor to be installed in their mobile suits, something that was previously impossible due to the N-jammers that they had developed at the beginning of the war. And secondly, they developed the Deuterion Energy Transfer System. This allowed a ship with the system to fire a beam of energy at a compatible mobile suit to instantly recharge it. These two technologies would then be combined into the Hyper-Deuterion engine, a kind of supercharged nuclear reactor that, in theory, could go on indefinitely. However, in reality, it was still possible for a machine with weapons and other systems that required a lot of energy to completely drain it, something that happened to the Destiny Gundam. Shin was using its heavy weaponry too much, which was then combined with the equally energy-hungry Voiture Lumiere system and the phase shift armor.
Shin, kito shiro.
But maybe you want your infinite energy source with some extra whistles and bells, like the Ahab reactor from Iron-Blooded Orphans. This reactor was the energy source for pretty much every mobile suit in the post-disaster timeline, and also came with some pretty cool features. In addition to creating perpetual energy, they also emitted a particle known as the Ahab particle. In ships, this was used to generate artificial gravity, and they also generated a wave known as the Ahab wave, something that disrupted radio waves, communication, and even guided weaponry. This made them extremely useful for combat, but also led to mobile suits being banned from cities because they majorly messed up systems there with their Ahab waves. Another benefit of these reactors then was that they were nigh indestructible, with even reactors dating back from the Calamity War being in perfect working order. And this was especially important because the reactors were both difficult to make and highly regulated by Gallarhorn. So as a wannabe PMC or a pirate group, you could just go scavenge for these reactors. From Gundam 00 then, we get the Twin Drive System, a development of the already very powerful GN Drive system. So let's start by looking at that. Developed by Celestial Being, these drives were, again, capable of providing the Gundam they're installed in with near limitless energy. But it really was their extra features that set them apart not just from engines in their own series, but from engines in every other Gundam series as well. So just like those other engines, they emitted their own special particle, this time called the GN particle, that messed with radio waves and whatnot. But this time, the engine is made in such a way that it doesn't generate a lot of heat, and even the thrust is taken care of by these GN particles, which then all combines into making the Gundams extremely stealthy machines. But their main feature is without a doubt the Transam system, a system that envelops the Gundam in a red glow and ups their performance by 3 times. The downside though was that this could only be used for a limited amount of time, and once that time was up, the machine was defenseless. The twin drive system then was the idea to not just use 2 of these GN drives together, which would double the performance, but to have them synchronize with each other, which would square their performance. The big problem for this though was that the 2 GN drives used had to be extremely similar, and even then it was extremely difficult to get them synced up. For example, in order to get the system to reliably work with the 00 Gundam, they had to install the riser system to help with that synchronization. Fortunately, this stability issue was no longer present in its successor Gundam, the 00 Quanta. This machine received 2 GN drives that were purposely built for that twin drive system, making them much more stable. So maybe now is the time to start working on a triple drive system. And now that we've seen some engines with particles that took inspiration from the Minovsky particle, I think it's time to have a look at the original, which is the driving force behind the Minovsky Ultracompact fusion reactor, and the mobile suit with the reactor with the highest measurable output that I could find was the Queen Mansa, a massive unit with an equally big reactor. And while the Minovsky Ultracompact fusion reactor might sound fancy to some, this was actually the standard for mobile suits in the Universal Century, and even dates back all the way to the first combat usable Zaku's. The simple explanation with this engine is that it used the Minovsky particle to keep the fusion reaction going, creating an endless supply of electricity, and was only 1/5 the size of the older Minovsky Ionesco reactor. Thanks to this, the reactor could now be mounted inside of the main body of the mobile suit, leading to the first actually combat usable mobile suits. But of course, not every Minovsky Ultracompact fusion reactor was equal. For example, the Zaku 1's reactor generated only 899 kilowatts, whereas the one used in the RX-78-2 Gundam could generate a much more impressive 1380 kilowatts. The Queen Mansa, meanwhile, had a devastatingly high 21,370 kilowatts. This was so ridiculously high that it didn't just dwarf contemporary mobile suits, but could even dwarf later mobile suits as well. Although this is also partially because in the late Universal Century, mobile suits got smaller and could do much more with smaller reactors. But still, the only machines in the Universal Century that could hold a candle to this thing's reactor were mobile armors like the Psycho Gundam and the Neue Ziel. Or the Unicorn Gundam, because that thing is just built differently. Spec-wise, its reactor only has an output of a meager 3,480 kilowatts, but as you all know, the Unicorn has a trick up its sleeve. Whenever the mobile suit detects a new type, it forcibly transforms into the destroy mode, turning off the limiters. And with them off, its thrust, sensor range, and power output all become so high that they're immeasurable. And because we saw Unicorn Gundam Unit 3, also known as the Phoenix, moving at or close to the speed of light, it's no exaggeration to assume that the other two would also come close to the theoretical maximum. Somehow. therefore making the Unicorn Gundam's reactor potentially the most powerful one out there. Which then also means that despite being one of the most powerful reactors around, we don't really know a lot about what exactly makes it tick. And the same goes for arguably the strongest reactor that is used in the strongest Gundam, the Discontinuous Hyper-Oscillation Gauge Collapsing Pile Engine, or DHGCP, which is installed in the Turn A Gundam. This bad boy straight up gets its energy from an artificial black hole. But that is about all that we know. One thing to keep in mind though is that the Turn A Gundam that we saw in the series was a nerfed version of the Dark History Turn A, which was a ridiculously powerful unit that was made for combat on a galactic scale, which also had a beam rifle that purportedly had the output of a colony laser. It also makes for a really good washing machine. And those were what I believe to be the 5 most powerful engines / reactors in all of Gundam. So let me know down below which one is your favorite. Personally, I really like the GN drives and their Transam system, because of the added dramatic and tactical flair they add. When is the best time to use it, and what happens after you use it. You can't just activate it willy-nilly and just wing it, which is what makes it so cool in my opinion. And what is also really useful is that you don't need any additional fuel. So, as always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.